Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Beit Midrash. Hope everybody had a good week. And if you didn't, then hopefully this will lift up your week, and it'll be a good week after this. Glad to have you here. Glad you're joining us, and glad to be learning together. Welcome to Parshat Bahar, our Torah reading for this week as we're approaching the end of the book of Vayikra, of Leviticus. And I was thinking, like, it's very serendipitous that we're reading the book now this year because it's a leap year on the Jewish calendar. There's a lot of the Parshiot are split because, like, for example, this one is usually combined with the next one, Bechukotai, that we usually read together most years. So, like, we'd be doing a lot more reading and discussing in a shorter amount of time. But with the leap year, we spread it out a little bit. So it's nice to be able to focus on each parsha on its own. Nice little introduction, ramble, whatever you want to say. But any thoughts, comments, reactions to what Rabbi Sacks had to say on Parshat Bahar?
So am I right that these directions, the 7 years and the 50 years, this really only takes place supposedly takes place in Israel, right? Not in
Correct. So yes, the laws. So just to, if you're not familiar, the laws of Shemitah, which indicates that you let the land rest on it in the 7th year, and the Yovel, the Jubilee year, in which the 50th year you don't harvest or plant or anything, and all the debts are all debts are forgiven and all slaves are released. That, yes, theoretically, that halachically at least, only happens in the land of Israel. I believe there is some evidence that it's actually a good practice to do generally, but halachically it only applies in the land.
And how much of that, if any of that, is done in modern day Israel?
Modern day Israel, they do some of it. The Jubilee, not as much. There's ways to work around it in some sense, but the Shemitah year is observed to some extent in Israel. Again, you have like secular Jews who might not observe it, but Orthodox farmers will observe it. There are also there are ways to do it to protect yourself also. So, for example, you can divide your field into 7s and like kind of each have a chunk of the field rest each year, a different, so that way it rests, but that you're not like out of income by not farming anything in the entire field. There is some academic question about whether the Jubilee was ever actually done. From a scholarly point of view, there's some question about whether or not that actually was enforced and actually happened in practice. But
well, in Israel, you don't really own the land; you're just renting it.
Well, that's kind of Rabbi Sacks' point, right?
Right. So if you say if God is the original owner and the land goes back to the original owner, I know that's not the intention, is to redistribute and make things more equal, but you can have all kinds of legal fictions by doing it that way.
Yes. And yes, you do hit on part of Rabbi Sacks's point, is, he talks a little more about, as I recall, he talks a little more about wealth generally. But yes, to Suzanne's point, like if part of the idea is that your money doesn't actually belong to you, it's kind of given to you or rented to you by God, well, then similarly, the land follows the same rules. Is that the land, it doesn't really belong to us either. It's given to us as a gift, a rental by God for us to use while we're here. There's some view that our bodies kind of fit into that same sense as well. That our bodies are not really ours; they are rented to us for the time that our souls inhabit them, and then they're returned to God at the end.
That's a much easier thing to manage than land.
Well,
I mean, that just takes a belief. With the land, you got all kind of legal stuff, and
well, I'll say, with some of the health issues that we have going on in our world, in our society generally, obesity, heart disease, cancer, cardiovascular, you can go down the long list. I would challenge somewhat that, taking care of our bodies is easier, but
oh no, I don't mean the taking care of it part. I just mean the giving it back part.
yes. Well, God doesn't ask us to necessarily give the land back, but God does say, I want you to take proper care of it by letting it rest once every 7 years.
I like the use of the word entrust, because he has trusted us and we have failed miserably.
Yes.
Entrust, that is a good word. I do like that as a, God has entrusted us to take care of our bodies. God has entrusted us to take care of the land. God has entrusted us with our wealth to see that we use it righteously and properly. I don't remember if Rabbi Sacks uses it or not, but I like that word too.
I was interested in when you mentioned wealth right now, in his discussion of the word tzedakah, or tzedakah, I guess. I don't know which way is better pronounced, the better pronunciation. But when he was talking about that being not only charity, but also justice.
Yes. Do you want to say more?
Well, I just had not understood the word that way, and that gives it a lot more meaning. And I understand why he is saying that there's no equivalent word in English, and that it's probably a good idea to be careful when looking at translations of the word to see what the what was really intended.
To answer your first question before I get to Barbara, the emphasis is on the second syllable, so tzedakah.
Thank you.
Yes, Barbara.
I also was very intrigued by the justice and charity combination. I hadn't ever looked at tzedakah that closely before, looked up meanings for it. And I was thinking about how we pass on the value of tzedakah to our children or to the next generations, and how do we teach? And I think that lots of times we try, or we do, teaching by example. When we think about various things that we do, a lot of our kids have funds with the Birmingham Jewish Federation that they started with their bar bat mitzvah money, and then it was matched by a generous donor in town, and so they had, and the program may still exist. Then they have funds which, when they become older and the funds reach a certain value, then they can turn them into donor advised funds or full-fledged funds, which is great, but that's by example. Or you see your parents making a donation here, making a donation there, volunteering for this, so that's all teaching by example. And it's never explained this way, unless it's in religious school. I don't know what modern religious school or even the day school is teaching about tzedakah. Tzedakah, as far as my kids being in the day school, was okay, bring your money in for this, or let's go sell a breakfast for that, and choose where we're going to donate our money. So the act of doing the tzedakah is separated from the meaning and the recognition of what it is. So how do we specifically teach tzedakah? We demonstrate it, but do we ever really say why? We never say, as far as I know, this is because that money is not really yours. God is letting you hold it in trust so that you do the right things with it. Maybe we need to really change how we're teaching this. Or how did Rabbi Sacks teach it in his religious school? I would be very interested to know, how can we change what we're teaching our kids about tzedakah? I know nothing about what's going on in religious school right now with respect to tzedakah.
No, it's an interesting question because, we do, I think largely, educationally, it follows somewhat similar to what you said. We're doing tzedakah projects. We're doing tzedakah. We're collecting money to donate to someone. I'm trying to think, like on some level, trying to teach some of this to young children is hard. How do you teach a 6 or 7 year old, for example, of justice and, this doesn't really belong to you and this doesn't really belong to me, and, and you should give it to those who need it because, it's a hard concept. But by middle school, you're right. Like they should be able to understand some of these concepts. And, I do like his example of, if I give you I'm going to change it for us, $1,000 because I owe it to you, that's justice. If I give you the same amount because I owe you nothing, but you need it, that's charity. And so if we have more, tzedakah is trying to be both, that we recognize you need it, I have more than I need, so why don't I share some of that with you as well? I do know they often do teach tzedakah at some point, usually in middle school, and they teach, usually they teach Maimonides' ladder of tzedakah and the 8 levels of tzedakah in some way, shape, or form. And I know I've done that multiple times, but I think you're right. I don't know if we do a good job of tying the theology into it necessarily when we're teaching it. We teach kids what to do. We don't necessarily teach them the theology.
I'm thinking how differently I was taught. I didn't have the Jewish day school. I didn't have the exercises or the example that way. But I'm just sitting here thinking, I never thought twice when I got my first scholarship. And my dad said, we will give that back. There are people who can use that would not be able to go or come to college unless they had that kind of help. So I never thought, I did it in college. I did it again in graduate school. And the director of the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU looked at me with big eyes and said, nobody's ever done that before. And I know there are many young students who need scholarships, but it just seemed to me natural. Now, why did it seem natural? It seemed natural because, number one, I'd heard the story about my dad's scholarship to Harvard. In 1928, 29 came, and although his dad had said, son, that's very lovely, I'm proud of you, but you must give that back. And my dad gave it back. And of course, 6-8 months later, he had to go into the dean and said, I can't go next year, I can't come. And the dean actually remembered that he'd had a scholarship. And he said, buddy, if you make all A's and B's, we'll give it back to you. But he learned that from his father. He was the immigrant, and he was much closer to whatever they were teaching in the shtetl at that point in Lithuania. But I've seen my children, even though you just hear the family tales, they don't ask. They just have done it and really surprised me at various times. But that's the way we've learned in my family.
You know, that brings up two things I was thinking of. After my father died, I was in a private school, and the headmaster called me into his office and said, you know, don't worry, because he left us with no money. Don't worry, you and your brothers have scholarships, you know, for the rest of the time that you're here. And then eventually my mother paid. She, it's a long story, but anyhow, eventually she had the money and she paid that money back. And I thought that was a good thing. But we also had a Quaker family in the school. This was a non-denominational private school, but in fact, almost all of, I would say, at least 80% of the kids there were Jewish, because all the other schools were either Catholic or what have you, religiously affiliated. But we had a Quaker family in the school, and one of the parents taught there for a while, and they had 5 kids, and the kids all had scholarships. But what was interesting to me is my mother paid the money back, and that was a good thing. But those kids were told by their parents constantly that you owe the school, and you need to serve the school. And they all did that in various kinds of ways. And it just seemed like an interesting and in a way a sort of sad difference in the way that the way we're taught. I really always admired, and I'm very close to members of that family, admire them greatly because of their constant service in small ways. None of them has money, so they don't contribute to anything that I know of, very much financially, but they do acts of service for the community constantly.
So, we keep talking about scholarships, and Rabbi Sacks, in the passage talks about kind of 3 ways of giving money. There's a fourth, fourth is a business transaction. I give you money, you give me some good in return. but he talks about justice, charity, and tzedakah. How, in your thought process, where would you categorize scholarship?
Depends on whether it's merit-based or need-based.
Exactly. It depends on who's.
Okay, so keep going. Either would do both.
There are two different answers.
Well, that's fine.
If it's need-based, I have straight A's and I don't have the money for school, then it's justice. You're helping me to do something that is right for me.
I don't think you even need the straight A's in there, Barbara.
Well,
Well,
okay.
Well,
What I meant is that I'm a good student. I have great potential. I have great work ethic. I'm going to make it pay off. And I'm going to share that then with my community by teaching, by working, by whatever. So it is the right thing for whatever the foundation, the society to do. It's justice for my way to school to be held, to be paid if I come from a family with 14 kids and my parents have normal jobs. Lower, or, I have a single parent. The other one, but there are certain circumstances where it's justice.
You want to do the merit-based and then I'll come back?
Merit-based is what you're supposed to pay back. If your family can pay, I'll let someone else answer that. I never qualified for merit-based.
So, here's go back to read Rabbi Sacks on page 179 at the top. If I give you, we do justice because we must. We give charity because we may. If I give you £1,000 because I owe it to you, that is justice. So, in some sense, he's making the argument that justice is something we owe and are repaying in that sense. So in your example of, one of 14 kids and they can't pay for college, are they owed something?
Yes, they are owed something because it's part of a normal education process before you get a job nowadays. How many good jobs are there out there with some kind of paperwork? And I can imagine that there are families for whom Jeff State or whatever the least expensive college available would be is still too much. And it's justice because it's basically a requirement by our society to have that kind of education. So I think that when we're talking about justice, it's not what I owe you, it's what society owes you when we're talking about scholarship. So if there are systems where your work shows that you're making progress, that you're doing well, you shouldn't have to pay if you qualify under those circumstances. Those who can pay, as Ellen described, those who can pay should pay. I know that very well. Those who can't pay still deserve the education if they are motivated and have the motivation.
So, when our daughter was young, she was at like a small Israeli daycare, and somewhat not irregularly. My wife would go pick her up and she'd be like, "So how'd she do today?" And they're like, haytak nudnikit. Like she was a nudnikit. She was like, she was kind of annoying. So I'm gonna be a nudnik. I'm gonna be a bit of annoying and not to say that this is my thought process or where I believe, but I play the devil's advocate for this. does society, what does society actually owe members?
Society needs to make it possible for me to be a valuable part of society. They can't put stumbling blocks in my way, such as this big financial. If
Okay.
I'm capable, if I'm going to put it to good use, if I am definitely, someone who is going to end up committing back. I mean, it's why the military pays for nursing school or medical school, or something like that. That doesn't necessarily apply at the undergraduate level. And I saw so many undergraduates who ended up leaving school, working 3 jobs, really struggling, that if they had an opportunity to have a less expensive education, a freer education, or if their parents, were in a different situation. Education is such an important requirement for today's world.
So I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm just going to be difficult.
I'd like to be difficult too.
You want to be difficult first,
Yeah.
Laura?
Yes, I would, because it brings up this whole issue of the Biden administration wanting to pay student debt. And there's the 2 sides of that, which I can see both sides, more the one group of people feels like, yes, that's, education has cost way too much. It's too much of a burden on these young people. The other side says, why should they get to their debt paid off? We don't get our debts paid off. So, there seems to need to be something that levels the field. For instance, with the veterans, my dad went to school on the GI Bill, and he would not have been able to go had it not been for that. So he gave his country service, and they gave him in return an education, which for that generation really was the opportunity. And so you can say that the government was paying for all of their tuition and their costs, and that was justified because they gave service to the country.
If they were,
So if you just come along and you're a kid that makes, it doesn't really matter the grades. If you've done nothing to deserve the government paying for your education, do you deserve to have it paid for you or that debt erased simply because we're going to say everyone deserves education?
Who's being erased?
Barbara, by the way, don't feel like you're on the spot to end. Like, other people can chime in if they agree with you. I
hope
don't want
they
to
do.
feel like
With
we're
good or bad. I'm not getting upset. I mean, I know how I feel. I know what I did. I know what I do, that kind of thing.
I'm not saying I believe either way. I'm just saying that's what's out there, that is 2 frames of thought, and both have some merit. If
I say Suzanne was going to say something, but she stepped away.
Suzanne just got a phone call.
Oh, okay.
I mean, by virtue of being a good student, you could say that you deserve to have higher education. But it's just so complicated. At what point does the government say, well, we'll pay for you, but not them because you had, 1 point better a grade, but let's say the other person has just tremendous common sense and would, really contribute to society if they had the education.
I probably did say something about a grade point average to get started, But you're right, that's not the critical factor. And I do agree with you. What matters is, do you earn it? Do you deserve it? Do you that kind of thing? Everybody doesn't deserve it equally. But you use the example of the GI Bill, and when people came back from the war with their GI Bill, colleges exploded. They were so packed. But what's important is that today, thank goodness, we're not getting tons of military. We do. There's still the GI Bill. But people are going to teaching. They're going to be first responders. They're going to be this. They're going to be that. So if you really wanted to get into it, you could decide, I'll pay for these and I won't pay for that. But education, I think I'll stick by my original thing that it's justice. Now, I'm not going to pay for you to go to, I don't know, Madame Gottrock's Madame Gottrock's rich university that costs $75,000 a year just for tuition. But there's college access. I do think
I don't know that.
society's handling.
What do you think of I guess this goes actually back to what
Lauren?
what was said before, because I was thinking about the kids who go to University of Alabama on a scholarship just because of their grade point average. So that seems to me to be charity, which may or may not be deserved.
I mean, because
I don't know what you think. I mean, that goes back to what you were saying, Ellen, really.
What I was going to say is that the playing field is not level from the beginning. And when we talk about how hard they've worked, how well did their teachers teach? How well were their teachers trained? Why do we have these rather miserable scores for our children in basic, the language they speak, the math, etc.? And that can be measured very early, that the school systems are so uneven and the backgrounds are so uneven, you can't, I sort of wonder sometimes how the ones who excel manage to figure out when and how they've got it. They've got it in themselves.
This is a little bit off the point, but I was just reading yesterday that this is the only, at least the only large country anyhow, that funds the schools based on the taxing,
property.
the local taxing as opposed to distributing the education money generally across all, I don't know what to say, also all parts of the society.
Margaret, you have to look at Alabama's history, since that's where we're living. And I mean, the legislature been for years, decades, allocated money for the education of children, less for the blacks, but as it turns out, not much of it ever got to the black children. It all went in one direction, and the black children had to get out of school and get that cotton picked. It's just a miserable story. And
I want to take a somewhat different tack to the question for a moment. Like, yes, what Ellen's describing is clearly unjust
Very.
and was not justice for that community. But I want to tease out Barbara's statement for a moment that, you know, we society, a just society would provide whatever needed education to all who want it or who need it, right? So let's play that out. So let's say society then would have to provide not a just society would not just have to provide through high school, but would also have to provide a college and a graduate degree education. Yes?
Not, you don't have to give people the graduate degree.
I don't think you have to give them the college degree, but I do think you have to provide an equitable way for people to pursue whatever level of education they're capable of. And that doesn't have to be a scholarship. It can be a loan, or it can be work study, or even just counseling on how to get through things. That's what I was more used to when I was coming along.
You know, let's say everybody went to college. What would happen to the workforce?
Well, right now you have people that are way overqualified for some of the jobs that they're doing. But there are, like you're hinting at, a lot of jobs that don't require a lot of education that still need to be done.
Laura, do you mean they don't require the education of, like, the person with the English degree who is working in a job that doesn't require an English degree?
Well, it's
There are a
working
lot
in a
of
job
people
that,
who have degrees that are nothing to do. I think it's very standard for a lot of people to end up doing something that has nothing to do with what their undergraduate degree is.
right. But even for instance, a laborer in the construction business, you know, if you're the contractor, you need to have a certain amount of education in that. But if you're the worker bee, you don't, all you have to do is be able to follow directions and, you know, some of the rudimentary skills that most all men or women would have that had nothing to do with education.
Say you've a young,
He's got something to say about that.
What?
I was going to say, if you think about a young man who's gone through school, always wanted to be an architect. He's now an architect, and he stands up to make a presentation to the university officials who are getting ready to add a building or whatever, or completely reconstruct their university. And he can't really express himself very well. I've seen that happen too many times. The people listening, judging, and choosing expect someone who speaks English, even though he does draw very well or was great in math. There are all kinds of basic skills that I think everybody more or less deserves.
Well, I'm talking about the basic skills of being able to hit a nail with a hammer type thing.
I just had 2 years worth of workers in my house, and there are plenty of people doing basic stuff that have college degrees, surprisingly, and love what they're doing. And I have a young lady who did trim in my house that had an architecture degree, but that's not what she wanted to do. But that education was very beneficial to her. Like most of the carpenters had college degrees.
I feel like everything you do, given a chance, ends up enhancing whatever it is you will do. A lot of people like to work with their
Well, that's
hands.
the question, what happens if,
But I think I don't disagree with you, Ellen. But do you need a college degree to go to be a carpenter?
A carpenter,
Yes.
I'm still saying yes.
if you love it, you've been doing it since your granddaddy taught you to hold a knife.
I mean, could you not apprentice as a carpenter
right,
or go to trade school to learn how to become a carpenter?
Yes, you can. Most people need access to education too. You know, they may need scholarships to get through, and they may need to get paid during that apprenticeship.
Yes. But so look, do we need education? Like, does every job need an education? Like, as Laura was saying, like, a construction worker still needs some education. They still need to know what they're doing and, how to use a screwdriver, how to use a hammer, how to use some of the tools that they're going to be using on site that I'm probably not qualified to do. And I did go to college.
and we all need to read, be able to read, but
Yes.
those are not graduate college level skills. My grandfather was a very successful builder, and he had a 7th grade education, but he read, and kept himself informed, and he was an educated man in that regard. Of course, I was pretty young, so I don't know how extensive his, education of what's going on in the world is, but that college doesn't necessarily give you that either. A lot of people go to college. My granddaughter is going now for an accounting, where she got her undergraduate accounting degree, but apparently that doesn't make you an accountant. So now she's in graduate school, but very early on in her curriculum, she was not taking any other courses other than what related to an accounting. So I don't consider her really college educated in the respect of being an overall educated person.
You mean like she didn't have a liberal arts education. She
Right.
had
Very specific,
Mhm.
more like vocational school for accountants. I mean, but and I'm not, that's what they have to do. So I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying things that I know are out there, and in that regard, Barbara, I don't think they still have the GI Bill. You go into the service, I don't think you get to choose to get a college education after.
I think you
Maybe
do.
it's
I think
not-
that's still
yeah.
going on.
Maybe it's not called the GI Bill, but I do know people who have taken advantage of that kind of a plan to pay for
Well,
education.
I'm really glad to hear that. Can they go in for 4 years and then go to college?
Or if you start as an undergraduate, if you start with ROTC at the time and then get your graduate education paid. So I believe so. I think that we still see military people at any level having repayment for college. Or even in one family we know, their kids had years of college. The father was career military and the kids had 4 years or whatever of college available to them.
Mhm.
And you can get a medical degree paid for by putting in 7 years at in the public health service, which is, or some other branch of the military. So that does continues to exist. But I think we've gotten a little bit away from the original topic.
Yes, I was going to pull us back, but in the closing minutes.
Do that.
So look, the conversation on tzedakah and charity and justice overall, we could probably go on all day for. But what were some of reactions to, I think, what Rabbi Sacks's quote unquote life-changing idea actually is, that what you have in your life you don't actually own.
You
Well,
can't take it with you, so I guess you don't own it.
I think it would be a boon to society if everybody if everybody took that seriously.
There's one way we excuse me, can do that, and that's on Shabbat. I mean, if you don't shop on Shabbat, that's one way to say, I don't own everything. I'm not the ultimate owner of things. It's just a way of living your life and reminding yourself that you're not the last, the be all and end all.
Well, I'm not sure it's necessarily that where you think we're the end all be all, though. I think I do make the argument that a lot of our Siddur, I think, is focused on reminding us of that, of humbling us to remember that. I think Rabbi Lawrence Kushner has his book, something along this title, like "There is a God and I'm not it," something like that, or I'm not God, or you're not God and neither am I. Something, it's kind of something kind of cheeky like that. But you know, Deuteronomy has this great line, which says, you know, when you get to the land and you build your house and you are and you plant your fields and you're well fed and you have this, don't think it's because of through your own actions that you have that. That you have it because God has given it to you.
Okay, but you have it. I mean, I think otherwise we're talking about artifice. I mean, I think this business of God owns everything, you don't own what you do own, is make believe. I mean, that does not resonate with me at all.
Because
I know that I owe a lot to whatever I have. It's not because of me or just because of what I've done. It's whatever from lots of people and from a greater power. But I mean, if you don't buy into this society having what it has, that you own it, you own your house, you own your land, you own whatever. It seems to me kind of get into chaos. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, from a theoretical point of view, I get it. I didn't create this by myself, but from a practical
You have a lifetime lease. How about that?
well, so yeah, so like you have your house. You have a house, you paid money for it, yes. Now you have a choice of what you're going to do with it. Are you going to use it to benefit you, your family, and those around you? Are you going to have people in to help build community with it? Are you going to welcome people into your house? Are you going to make sure it's well cared for so that you and your family have shelter? Or are you going to buy up lots of houses and flip them so that you can make more money off of them, and then, you know, charge ridiculous amounts of money to be able to just keep amassing more? I hear what you're saying, Howard. I think part of what Rabbi Sacks is trying to say is, you know, yes, you might have it, you might be entrusted with these things right now, but how you use them is up to you. And can you use them for a holy purpose to that benefits more than just you, or no?
And also, I think what you said, Howard, that it's the recognition that you are where you are because of, maybe God didn't like stick down his hand and push you into medical school, but you are where you are because of a whole lot of circumstances in your life, in the society, and so on and so forth, that you didn't do it all. You didn't do it all on your own. None of us are where we are only because of ourselves. And I think that's a way of, I think God is a sort of a shorthand for acknowledging that.
So the point really is just to be grateful and to give back.
I think, yes, to be grateful that you've been able to acquire those things that you have acquired, but to not hold on to them so tightly that it's only for your benefit that you have them. But how can you, as he says, it's not what can I gain, but what can I give? How can we use the gifts that we have, that God has allowed us to amass, for the benefit of more than just ourselves? Yes, Barbara.
I have a really different question that I hope is a quick answer. Previously, we spent a lot of time talking about who is a stranger. This chapter, page 178, he brings up brother. Who qualifies as a brother? He says, if your brother is poor and sells himself to you, don't work him as a slave. And brother, I want to know who that is. Could it be Margaret? She's not a brother.
Well, sister will work too.
Well,
no, who is a brother?
and
We're not talking about blood brother, are we?
So, it's funny. I was asked to give like kind of an opening, a 3-minute. Whose idea was it to give a rabbi 3 minutes? But besides that, to give it at a conference, give like an opening talk at a conference for 3 minutes, putting that out. And the theme of the conference is, who is my brother? Who is my neighbor? And I was working on it last night, and this is my 2 cents on it. This is the spoiler, because I don't think it's a clergy conference, so I don't think any of you guys are going. So you can hear what I'm saying, even nonetheless. One of my favorite rabbinic texts comes from the Mishnah in Sanhedrin. Most of you know it because the Mishnah begins by saying, whoever destroys a life is as if they destroyed an entire world. Whoever saves a life is as if they saved an entire world. Heard that before?
No.
It's a good quote. It's the one that gets quoted frequently. But there's a seifa, there's a second half of the Mishnah, which they say, when God created the world, why did God create only one person? Why did God only create Adam when God created the world? And the Mishnah gives 3 answers. The first is to not allow heretics the opportunity to respond. So you say God, humans were created in God's image. If God had created 2 people, you could very easily say, well, this one's created in the image of that God, this one's created in the image of that God. Or if God created 5 people, maybe there are 5 gods, each created in their. That's the Mishnah's first answer. The second answer is the one that I'm going to quote to the clergy, which is that so that nobody can say my father is greater than your father. ultimately, we're all relatives in some form because we're all descended from the first people. And the third answer, which is one that I like to use a lot, is, and I think I've told you guys, I may have told you guys this before too, but it's worth quoting again. It goes to show God's power in that when a human puts their image on a coin, every coin looks the same. So I always say, if you pick up a penny from even any given year, every penny will look identical. Abraham Lincoln doesn't change very much. But when God puts God's image on each individual person, all of us look different. So who is our brother? Everyone. Who is our neighbor? Ultimately, everyone. We are all intertwined and interconnected with each other. And if we do believe that God created the world and God created Adam, then, we're all related to each other ultimately. And there is this great concept in Kabbalah, which argues that all of us, like everything in the world is essentially, to put it in our terms, is a cell in the divine organism. We're all dependent and reliant on each other because we're all part of the same organism. Guess what? You can't leave. Like, you can't ignore the rest of your organism. Your elbow can't say, you know what? I don't want to be a part of this body anymore. I'm out. You can't do that either. You can't say, I don't want anything to do with my spleen. I'm out. You can't really do that. And you can't really say, I don't care what happens to my liver because, I don't like it anyway. You need every cell and organism along the way or every cell and every part of your body to work together in harmony for the organism to thrive. And so, who is our neighbor? Who is our brother? I argue everyone is.
Then why do we have strangers? Maybe my argument is, or maybe my discomfort is really with the word stranger then, because stranger was, okay, now you're going to tell me I'm wrong, but that's okay. Stranger, wasn't that supposed to be anyone not born Jewish?
Well, that's what Deuteronomy says. I mean, that's very clear in Deuteronomy that and this parsha that he's talking about.
Stranger is a resident alien. It's someone who lives amongst the Israelites but is not Israelite.
Or someone who converted.
So in rabbinic literature, it becomes somebody who converts, yes. But in the Torah's vocabulary, it's somebody who is who's obligated to parts of the commandments, to some mitzvot, by the fact that they're living amongst the Israelites, but they're not Israelite themselves. Over time, its meaning evolves to mean somebody who converts.
Well, Rabbi, I'm much happier with your explanation today of who is your brother, because it means me, myself, and I equals my brother, equals the stranger, equals whatever. I like the concept of the interconnectedness. Far be it from me to ever agree with you on anything, but
Chas v'shalom. God forbid.
no, thanks for getting that last little bit in. I appreciate the brother discussion.
Any other concluding thoughts before we wrap up for today?
So that is the evolution from Deuteronomy to rabbinical thinking.
Yes.
Under both, Barbara, we are brothers.
Okay, bro.
I think it's bra, like bra now.
No.
I think that's what the
Bra
kids are
is
saying.
This.
Oh, no. I think the
Yeah,
kids are
bruh.
saying, bra.
Goodbye,
Yo,
everybody.
bruh.
Oh,
Good to
okay.
learn with y'all. Thanks for coming. Good to learn with you. And if I don't see you, Shabbat Shalom. And have a peaceful, restful Shabbat. And I look forward to learning together next week.
And a happy and safe weekend holiday.
Yes.
Hmm.
Good Memorial Day to everyone. Take care. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Here. Thank you all.